Hello everyone. Welcome to another gardening Q&A live on White Davy Gardening and Worm Farm. Today we're going to be discussing garden design and how you can identify your soil type. So feel free to share your experience with designing your garden and discuss whatever soil type you may have. Hi, Sian. Okay, so we're going to be discussing some questions that a lot of beginner gardeners tend to have. And sometimes you may not be a beginner gardener, but you may still ask some of these questions. But this discussion, especially for the garden design, is mostly for beginners. So some of the questions might seem silly to you, but everyone starts from scratch. So we're going to be sharing some important points that people who are new to gardening can benefit from. And so the first question that a lot of gardeners, when they're starting out, will ask is, what should I consider when I'm planning my garden design? And so there are a lot of things that need to be considered. Oh, hi, Mom. There are a lot of things that need to be considered when you are planning your garden. And so I'm going to be sharing quite a few of them with you. So one of the main things that you want to focus on is where to place your garden so that it gets adequate sunlight. Hi, Han White. Right, so you want to consider the best location to place your garden so that it gets adequate sunlight. You also want to consider how much space you have for gardening, because that is also going to determine how much you can plant. You also need to consider where you're going to put your pathway in your garden. When I just started gardening, I didn't think about pathway. I just plant everywhere and then I just skip between the plants. But having pathway make it a whole lot easier to access all of your garden rather than just planting all over the place. And I'm going to be discussing a little further on things that you need to consider when creating a pathway through your garden. Not to mention the fact that it makes your garden a whole lot neater and reduce the risk of you damaging your plants because you're trying to skip through tiny spaces. So if you're going to be planting things that are over 30 inches tall, then you want to keep them 2 to 3 feet away from pathways because you don't want them to be hanging out in your pathway because that is going to damage your plants. And it can be frustrating sometimes trying to get around these branches that are in your way. Also, keep the future in mind when you're planning your garden. Plan your garden so that you do not have to infringe on future projects. So, for example, suppose you know that your house doesn't have a deck and you're planning to put a deck in the future. Plan your garden so it does not infringe on the spot that you want to put your deck, because then you're going to have to be spending time to move that garden. And if you're using gardens such as raised beds and containers, then it can be cumbersome trying to move those. So it's best to consider future projects when you are planning your garden. Okay, if you're if plants if you're going to plant a garden close to your driveway, you need to ensure that whatever plants you are planting are not going to block your line of sight, because that can lead you to have accidents. So you want to put your lower plants closer to the driveway so that it doesn't block your sight, and put the larger plants where it is safe. You also, this one is very important, you have to consider your neighbors. You don't want to plant your garden in a way that it is going to have a negative effect on your neighbors. So always consider your neighbor. Make sure that your garden also conforms to the local laws, because some areas have more restrictions than others. So it is a good idea to know what the local laws are when it comes to gardening. Also, your garden should be aesthetically pleasing to the eyes. So your garden is not just for you, unless your property is fully fenced around where no one can see your property on your property. Then you have to consider your neighbors passing by, and you have to think about yourself as well, because when your garden is neatly organized, it is so much more enjoyable for you to be out there. But when your garden is just all over the place and it is not neat, it is not tidy, sometimes it can be frustrating for you, and it can be even more work for you trying to get around all the clutter. So make sure that your garden is aesthetically pleasing. And then the final point that I'm going to be discussing in terms of what you should consider when you're planning your garden is to plan your garden so that it is close to a water source. Because if you don't have water source nearby, then you're going to have to be carrying water to water your plants, and that can be tedious. And especially if you are someone who is busy and you have to spend time to look after your garden, you want to be able to spend as little time as possible taking care of your garden if you're busy. So make sure that your garden is close to a water source to make things a little bit easier on yourself. Okay, now here is a question that a lot of beginner gardeners will ask. How often should I water my garden? Now, the answer for this depends on whether or not your plant is moisture loving, or if they are okay with just a little water. It is also dependent on the climatic condition at the time when you're considering watering. So for plants that loves water, you might have to water them daily. And for those that like just a little water, then it's good to allow your soil to dry out around the ones that love a little bit of moisture to a good extent before you actually water them again. But for the ones that love water, you still have to be careful, because you don't want to be overwatering them just because they love water. Because then you can end up with a lot of problems like root rot or even diseases, or the plants can become waterlogged. So you have to monitor your soil. Usually, if the soil is dry down 2 inches from the surface or more, then it is a good idea to water. And the rule of the thumb is once a week, a thorough watering is pretty good. And this is another question that a lot of gardeners will ask. Are cheap plants more likely to die? Not necessarily. Here are some points to consider before buying cheap plants. Plants can be cheaper because the vendor has a large inventory, and therefore they can afford to sell at a lower price. Hi, Russell. Okay, another thing is that vendor could lower the price because they want to compete with their competitors. Pot size also can affect the cost of plants. Let's see, and why? I usually water every 2 days. Okay, yeah. Some regions require more watering more frequently than others. I know that for here in Saskatchewan, watering frequently is very important. In fact, most times I have to water every day because the water evaporates very quickly here. Okay, plants supplied by annual growers can be lower in price than plants that have been patented. So usually some growers will patent their plants so that you keep coming back to them when you need supplies rather than going everywhere else. So it is only available to them, from them, that is. So in that case, their plants will be more expensive. And price may also vary depending on the type of plant. For example, an apple tree of the same size when compared to a mango tree may have different prices. Now, some garden center may sell fruits that are of the same size or of the different type of fruits. All the fruit trees that they have may come at the same price. Some may not do that. Some may consider whether the fruit is unique and things like that. So these can affect pricing of your plants. Now, is the vendor using inferior materials such as pots or soil? So these are some of the things that you want to consider when you're going to be buying plants that are cheap. Why are plants cheaper? Are they damaged? Are they overgrown? Is the growing season about to end? These are also points that you need to consider. Are they selling out to make way for new inventory? So the conclusion is, as long as the plant is healthy, it doesn't matter if it is cheaper. In fact, why waste money to buy expensive plants if you can get it cheaper, as long as you know that your plants are healthy and good to go? Okay, so here's another very important question. How can I utilize my garden space fully? So I'm going to be discussing several points to consider. So as to ensure that you get the most out of your garden space, and especially if you have a smaller garden. Now, if you have a small garden, consider growing the plants that are most important to you. So if you know that you like tomatoes and carrots and your growing space is little bit, then plant tomato and carrots. Make sure you have those, and then if you have space for anything else, then you put those in. And why it says interplanting, yes, I was going to mention that point as well. So that is another way to utilize your garden space. Now, how much space will each plant need? You need to consider that because you don't want to plant your garden so thick that air cannot circulate between your plants properly, because that can result in quite a few different types of plant disease and pests. So, as Ann White says, interplanting or companion planting is a great way to maximize wasted space and at the same, sorry, to minimize wasted space, and at the same time it maximizes your yield. So companion planting is a good thing to consider. Now, if you have a longer growing season, then you might want to also consider succession planting. Consider growing varieties that require shorter maturity time. Um, Consider trellising plants to increase growing space as well. So anything like your tomatoes, you have vining tomatoes or the indeterminate tomatoes, these can be trellised and maximize space. Cucumbers, your squash, pumpkin, stuff like that can be trellised. So in order to maximize space, consider trellising what can be. Hannah, can you guys keep down the noise? Thank you. Sorry about that. Also important is to consider your sunlight. When you're planting, you want to ensure that your bigger plants are planted towards the north if your garden is oriented north to south. And bigger plants should be to the back of your garden, whereas the smaller plants should be in front to ensure that the larger plants are not blocking the sunlight from the lower plants. But you have to consider the orientation of your garden where sunlight is concerned. You also want to make sure that you don't overcrowd your garden, as I mentioned before. You can also get free garden planners, or you can purchase a garden planner. Of course, if you guys have any experience with planning your garden, feel free to share it. I'm sure that beginners will be happy to learn from other people's experience. Now, this may sound like a silly question, but there are many beginners who will ask whether or not they should feed their plants. And the answer is yes, plants require nutrients to grow and to produce fruits. I don't know, she's not in here. Can you close the door and go, please? Because I'm doing my live now. Thank you. Kids. Yes. So how much nutrients a plant needs depend on the type of plant, and it also depends on the size of the plants. Some plants require a lot of nutrients. Some plants might require more of a particular type of nutrients than others. So there are many factors to consider when you are feeding your plants. So take all of these factors into consideration. And it's a good idea to research the plant if you don't know what the nutrient requirement is, because you want to ensure that you get the best out of your garden. So do a little research on the plants that you intend to grow. Now, how can you control weed in your garden? There are quite a few ways that you can control weed in your garden, and I won't be mentioning anything about pesticides or artificial pesticides because I don't use them and I don't recommend them because they cause more harm than good. Now, BT is an organic pesticide, and it works pretty well, especially if you use it when your pests are in their younger state, because as they mature, it tends not to work. But the negative thing about BT is that the more you use it, the more often you use it, the more it gradually invites aphids to your garden. So you want to control just how often you use BT in your garden. Now, your garden is always full of weed seeds. And seeds can be on the surface, it can be deep into your soil, and they can lay dormant for many years. So only seeds that are in the top 2 inches of your soil will get enough light to germinate. So one way that you can use to control weed is to try not to disturb your soil more than is necessary. So if you can plant your garden without tilling the entire garden, if you can just create an opening to plant in holes, then that would be a good idea, because then you're not bringing up the seeds that are deeper in the soil for them to germinate. Another method that you can use is to mulch. It is a great way to control weeds because it prevents most of the seeds from getting the light that it needs to germinate. Now, you have to keep in mind, however, that some mulch may contain weed seeds, so you have to be careful. You have to be diligent. So, depending on the type of mulch that you're using, you want to observe your garden, and as soon as you see weed, then you want to get on it and try to get rid of them. So, weed out your garden as soon as you can to prevent these sprouts from actually spreading. And the best time to weed your garden is actually when your garden is wet. So after you've watered your garden or after it rained, because the soil is softer, so it is easier to get the plant or the weeds up from the root. So this is the best time to actually weed your garden. Now, some weeds have very long roots, and because of that, it is hard to pull them out. So it is a good idea to just cut below the surface and cut the root of the plant. Or if the weed has grown, then you want to trim off the upper layer of the plant or the weed so that it does not start to seed, because once it starts to seed, then it will be difficult to control the weed in your garden. Another way that you can control weed, if it is possible, is to water only the plants that you want and not water the weed. But that can be tricky, especially if you have sprinklers or anything of the sort that you use to water your plants. But if you're watering by hand, then you may be able to water the plants you want and not the weed. Another method that you can use to control weed in your garden is to cover your garden with cardboard or with thick layers of newspaper. Sometimes you can put landscaping fabric over your garden as well. Use it to cover your garden. Now, if you're going to be planting with the cardboard in place, you can just create holes in your cardboard or whatever material you're using to cover your garden. You can just create holes in it and plant in the holes so that you will have less weed growing. Now, some people use vinegar to control weed, but a very important point that they need to consider when it comes to using vinegar, is that whatever effect vinegar has on weed, it will have the same effect on your plants. So it is not really a good idea to use vinegar among your vegetable to control weed. Because if it kills the weed, it's going to kill your vegetable as well. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, if you have any other ideas on how to control weed, then feel free to share what method you use. Sometimes weed in your garden can take a lot of time and a lot of effort. I know that for where I'm living, we have Dutch elm trees, and our Dutch elm trees, they are prone to Dutch elm disease. And so you cannot compost the leaves, you cannot use the wood for firewood, you cannot use it for mulch. It's not recommended that you use it for anything. In fact, they recommend that when you harvest the leaves, when you rake the leaves in the winter, you have to take it to a specific location. You cannot just bag it and put it with your regular garden waste. If you have the wood, you have to bury it 2 feet deep, or you take it to a special location in the city to let them handle it, because the Dutch elm disease is actually pretty bad. Now in my yard, I have 4 Dutch elm trees. 2 of them is government property because they're on the front of my yard, and then there are 2 in my backyard, and one of them is hanging over my garden. So when I go in my garden, I have to weed my garden every single day. And these Dutch elms, they drop seeds by the millions, and I'm not exaggerating. They drop seeds by the millions. So right throughout the garden season, I just constantly have to be weeding. So depending on the type of weeds that you have, it can be a lot of work. So do your best to control the weeds before they get out of hand. Now we're going to be discussing soil type and how you can identify it. So what type of soil do you guys have? Okay, there are many different, well, several different type of soil, and sometimes you can have a combination of soil type on your one property. So we're going to be looking at the various soil types. So let's start off by talking about the sandy soil. These you can identify because, oh, you don't know what type you have. Okay. Yeah. Mine is, most of the soil here in Saskatchewan is sandy, and you have to either buy topsoil and bring it in, or you create your own topsoil, which can be costly. So sandy soil, it tends to be gritty or grainy, and even if you wet it, you will not be able to roll it into a sausage shape. It won't stick together. Oh, you have no idea. Okay. Yeah. So the sandy soil, it won't really stick together unless, of course, it is very fine and have other type of soil mixed with it. Now, so that is how you're going to identify your sandy soil, because it is gritty, and when wet, it does not stick together. Um, the clay soil, it is sticky when it is wet, and it can easily be made into a sausage shape. It will stick together. It can become smooth and shiny when you rub the wet soil. Let's see. I plant in containers, therefore I use compost. Okay. So your soil is mostly humus then. And silt is the next type of soil. And the silt tend to be slippery. It's kind of soapy when it is wet. It is granular, and the particle size are between that of sand and clay. So that is silt. It is slippery and soapy when it is wet. And then the next type of soil is chalky soil. Now, a chalky soil, when you place it in vinegar, it will froth because of the calcium carbonate or the limestone that is in it. Now, soil is called silt when the silt is, the content of the soil is at least 80% silt. So if it doesn't have 80%, then it's not considered silt. No, I don't, you'd have to get it tested to know if it is 80% or more. So these methods are ways you can readily identify the type of soil that you have, but you can always get your soil tested. Okay, now this type of soil is what most gardeners want because it is said to be ideal because it can retain a good amount of moisture, and at the same time it is well drained. It is loose and crumbly. So this particular type of soil is good for gardening, and that is a loamy soil. Now, what is a loamy soil? Loamy soil, it consists of sand, silt, and a small amount of clay. So it is pretty ideal for your garden. So it consists of roughly about 40% sand, 40% silt, and about 20% of clay. And this soil is ideal for gardening. Now, what does loam mean? Because we're hearing of loamy soil, but what does loam mean? A loam is a soil mixture, and it is named based on the type of soil that is present in the highest amount. So, for example, if the soil is referred to as a clay, loamy soil, then that would indicate that there is more clay in that mixture than all the other types of soil. If it is referred to as a sandy loam, then it would indicate that the mixture contains more sand than other soil types. And sometimes you will see soil type like sandy clay loam or sandy silt loam and stuff like that. So based on the amount of a particular type of soil that is in the mix, then that is how the loamy soil is named. So based on this discussion today, what type of soil do you think you have? Of course, there are times when our soil might be just organic matter. So in that case, it's usually just called humus. Mine, as I mentioned before, is mostly sandy, but then because I've been adding a lot of organic matter to my garden over the years, and so now I'm starting to see my soil becoming more growing friendly. More, it has more what you call that now, organic matter in it. So it is getting there. It's not quite there yet. I think I have a bit of clay soil as well, because some part of my garden tend to be very sandy, and then some of it tend to be somewhat of a clay. So the main garden is mostly clay. So I have been working over the years to try to amend the soil, which is one of the reasons why I want to see more casting production from my worms, because I'm hoping that I'll be able to use that to amend the soil and try to get it as viable as possible. Okay. Let's see. So on White, you mentioned that you plant in containers using compost. So do you not have any soil? Do you plant in just straight compost? Okay, so that in the ground that you have, you say you think it is a clay-like soil. Okay, okay. Yes, so a good constant feeding of organic matter will help to make the clay soil more suitable for planting. But one of the good thing about clay soil is that it is very good when you want to plant plants that love moisture, because clay holds moisture, whereas sand and the silt does not hold as much. So this is also one of the reasons why you need to have organic matter mixed in with your clay soil, because the clay will hold a lot of water. But when you have the organic matter in between the clay, then it will make the soil well drained, but at the same time, it will be able to hold enough moisture for your plants. And so when your soil tend to be clay, then you can plant, it's better to plant those plants that actually love moisture in it. Let's see. I have been feeding it with food scraps. Last year, nothing that I planted in it did well. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. What I've been doing the same thing too, with my main garden. Over the years, initially when I started composting, I would compost in place. So during the winter, I would just put all of the food scraps on the surface of the soil. And then as I cultivate the soil in the spring, then everything get mixed in. And then I started burying the food scraps in the garden. And over time, I start to see a bit of difference, but recently I have not been putting the food scraps directly in the garden. I've been composting it first and then add it to the garden. It is recommended that you try to add at least 3 to 6 inches of organic matter to your soil each year, because that will help the soil to be amended. Let's see. Hopefully, this year will be better. Yes, I hope so too. Yeah, so since I started putting the organic matter in my garden, I can see a lot of difference. So I'm just going to continue doing that. I'm going to be putting finished compost, and I'm going to be putting the worm castings. So I'm going to be putting a lot of layers and see what happens. It does take time though. It doesn't immediately become the type of soil that you want when you add organic matter. So it's going to take a few years, but with time it will become the type of soil that you need. Let's see. And why it says, mind you, I always plant tomato in the soil and they do extremely well. Yes, that's good. Yeah, I tend to use my main garden for the things that I know will love the clay soil, because it is able to retain the moisture. But the one side of my garden that is mostly sun, most things that I planted over there have not been doing very well. But in the last year, well, last year, I actually put raised beds, low raised beds over that location. But prior to that, I was mixing in organic matter in that portion of the garden, because there was no nutrients there for the plants. So when I planted anything over there, they would not do well. So putting the organic matter over there has been helping. But now that I've put raised beds, so my raised beds are low, the ones that I have over in that location, they're pretty low. So some of the roots still goes into the sandy soil, but because most of the soil is in the raised bed, so the plants are able to get a good supply of nutrients. So how far are you along now on white, or not just on white, but for you guys on this program? How far along are you in terms of getting your garden organized? If I am to be honest, I am no, I am nowhere close to getting my garden organized. After I did those videos on the garden series, where I was able to plan in your garden series, where I was able to make a list of the seeds that I have, and then I did the next two videos on what can be companion planted together with the things that I'm going to be growing. I haven't really looked at planning my garden further than that. I have been preoccupied in the last week or two with house chores killing me because it's just piling up. So I haven't really reached anywhere in terms of planning my garden so far. The only thing that I have done regarding planning my garden after I did those videos, um, yes, I looked at when to plant the things that I want to grow this year. I look at when to plant them in my region, and then I make a list of them and get them organized so that I know. So I pretty much know the dates that I need to start all of what I want to grow now because I have them organized in my book. So I'm excited because March 12th I can start sowing some seeds indoors. So I can't wait until March 12th get here. So as soon as I get off the rush that I have at home here, I'm going to start gathering my containers and preparing the soil and stuff like that. I can't wait to get started. But I don't think I want to start my indoor plants in the house. I'm going to be moving them out to the garage, but I'm going to have to get a few more grow lights. We'll see what I do. So I need to go set up my greenhouse out there too, but then I don't want to set it up too early because it's going to take up too much space in my garden, in my garage. And I have to do quite a few work in my garage. So you haven't started yet. Oh, okay. Let's see. And White says, I've got mine organized on paper. Yes, at least you got it started. So, like, are you guys able to start growing things indoors just yet? Kind of frustrating waiting until all the way in March to get started. I wish I could just get started now, but I guess there's still so much to prepare for that period of time that I guess it will make the time seem to go pretty fast. Thankfully, when I was going through what I can grow in my location, or at least the things that I want to grow in my location, most of them seem to I can start them earlier than I thought because I always wait until the last frost before I direct sow anything outdoors. But based on my research, a lot of the things that I want to grow, I can actually plant them before, at least sow the seeds before the last frost. So I was pretty excited to learn that. So I guess I'm gonna get started, but I'm gonna make sure that I have the means to cover them just in case they germinate very early and then frost destroy them. Because that would be such a waste. I would actually literally cry. Let's see. Rosa says, I wait until the first or second week of February to start peppers. Oh, okay. Yeah. My peppers, I have to wait. The peppers too, they said it has to be March. I would think that because peppers take so long to produce fruit that they would say a little bit earlier than that, maybe February, but no, it is March as well. But I don't know because I'll be growing Scotch bonnet peppers along with a lot of other peppers, but the hotter the pepper, the more growing time it actually needs, as you will learn in my video that will be for tomorrow. because tomorrow I'm going to be discussing how to grow peppers and the needs that peppers have. And then Tuesday's video is going to be about the type of pests and diseases that affect peppers. So let's see. And why it says, yes, I have my peppers. Yes, I have my peppers. I have my peppers and I planted tomatoes today. Oh, nice. Yeah. Oh, I'll be waiting. I'll be just doing what I can and wait until I am able to plant. I don't want to start too early. I've done that so many times, starting early because I'm anxious, and then some of them die because as they grow, my grow lights are not getting any bigger, and so they cannot really provide enough lights for my plants. So the plants tend to suffer a lot. So I'm gonna be waiting this time around. Let's see. I can't wait to watch those videos. Oh, okay. Oh, 8 o'clock tomorrow and 8 o'clock on Tuesdays, my time, which is GMT 6, whatever that means. Yeah, they will be available. Some years, not all peppers come up soon enough, and I have to start new ones before the tomatoes are started. Oh, yeah. Gosh. Well, oh, I haven't given an update on those pepper seed that I was testing. Oh, hi, Khadija. No, it's not Khadija, it's Tina. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I'm gonna, yeah, some of my peppers did not germinate, but my Scotch bonnet, they're doing pretty well, as you're gonna be seeing. LOL. As you're gonna be seeing in the video tomorrow, they are not doing too bad. I'm pretty happy with how they're doing. I still think they are growing a bit slow, but as I mentioned, sometimes the light is not enough for them because I only have 3 lights going, and I have about 5 plants, and I'm just rotating them underneath the light. I have more grow lights, but I really don't want to. Oh, hi, West London. I have more grow lights, but I don't really want to have them running from so early in the game. So, yeah, because everything here in this province is super expensive. We in Saskatchewan, whatever you would buy in places like Toronto and those areas, you're gonna be paying at least double the price because I don't know if maybe it's because of the distance that we are from major provinces, but everything here is just super expensive. So if I don't have to run the grow lights early, I don't want to. Let's see. The older the pepper, the sooner they fruit, though. But if rabbits get it, yeah. Well, my peppers are going to be covered outdoors because I don't want no pests and no rabbits or whatever other insect. I don't really have much problem with animals apart from rabbits that occasionally comes in the yard. But the main reason I'm going to be covering my peppers is because they love heat, and in Saskatchewan, even in the winter, even in the summer, sometimes it can be cooler than the pepper would like. Oh, hi, Eden Farhome. I hope I pronounced that properly. Or Fee Home. I don't know. Yeah, so I hope. So I will be covering my pepper in the hope that it will make the pepper produce fruits early. I haven't been able to harvest any peppers in the 3 years that I've been trying to grow peppers. Oh, that's not true. Jalapeno, I bought the jalapeno plant. So this one I didn't grow from seeds. I bought the jalapeno plant, about 2 plants, and that was 2 years ago. And I had a really nice harvest of jalapeno. So I don't know if maybe they started it indoors early or what the case was, but I got a really nice harvest. But apart from that, none of the seeds that I've ever sown have ever grown to the point where it actually produced fruit that I was able to harvest. The growing season always end before I'm able to harvest. So this year I'm really going to try my best to get an head start on it. Visalia, California says hello. Oh well, hello Visalia, California. Let's see. West London says, I don't want grow light. I have my seedlings on the windowsill, but it's getting full now. That's the next thing. How much can you grow on your windowsill, and how many windows do you have turned towards the south so that you can get sufficient light? For me, as I mentioned before, I don't have any south facing windows. My house is oriented east to west, so I don't have any windows in the north or south. So growing on the window pretty much is a no-no. Even the plants that does not require a lot of sunlight, when I put them on my windowsill, they still struggle. I have comfrey on my windowsill, and you know how easy it is to grow comfrey, and even the comfrey is struggling. Since I've had it since about October. I got it, and I gave away one of the plants. I have one plant remaining, and from that time until now, there is no sucker coming up. So I don't know, but at least the good thing is that it is not dying. It doesn't look too bad, but a lot of time the leaves thin to the point where they get discolored, or you can actually look through the leaf, which is one of the symptoms of not getting enough sunlight. So, but it's not dying, so I'm hoping it will hold on until the growing season gets here. It would be nice also if I could get some comfort seeds, but I've been searching for years to see if I can get comfort seeds to buy, but I've never been fortunate that way. So let's see. Do you grow flowers, White Davy? Oh, just a minute. I think I missed quite a few comments here. Okay, that's West London. And White says hello. Yes, me too. Okay, so Pit Stop says I overwintered mine and they're doing well. That's great. What type of peppers do you have? Yeah, I'm going to try, definitely going to try overwintering some, at least one of my Scotch bonnet pepper plants. And if the chili that I got is the type that I'm looking for, then I'm going to overwinter one of those as well. Because the chili, there's a chili pepper that we had when we were growing up as kids, and I've never seen it anywhere else. Just that one plant. I've never seen it anywhere else, but when no one was around, someone tied their animal on our property and destroyed the plant, and I've never seen it again. Now, the flavor of this chili pepper is it is to die for. I've never tasted any pepper with such a nice flavor apart from some of the Scotch bonnet varieties. And I've been searching. Every time I see a different type of chili, I've been searching. I don't know what type of chili it was. I see one recently that seemed to be it, but by the time I tried to get the seed, it was to buy the seeds, the store ran out. And then I saw another one that looks close to it. So I bought those seeds and I'm hoping that it is the right one. So we'll see how that goes. If it is the one I'm looking for, then I'm going to overwinter it. Let's see. West London says, and the days are getting longer and I'm looking forward to more planting soon. Do you grow flowers, Han? Do you grow flowers on White Davy? Well, no. I don't grow flowers because I don't have the growing space for it. The area in my yard where I want to grow flowers, because I love flowers, but the area in the yard where I could grow flowers, I actually have the bed made for it years now, but I can't plant any flowers there because the government has two Dutch elm trees in the front of my property, and you can't cut their trees. And those trees are blocking the sunlight from in front of these beds that I have for flowers. So I don't really have any flowers there. However, over the fall, I planted some tulips in my garden on the edge of one part of my garden. So I will see how that goes. It would be great if it actually grows and produce fruits, produce tulips for me because I love tulips. They're really beautiful, and I have the type that have multicolors. I don't remember what it is called. So, and then this year I'm going to be growing flowers, not for the flowers because they would take up my gardening space, but I'm going to be growing them because of their ability to attract beneficial insect and to control pests. So for that reason, I will be growing flowers this year, but I won't be growing a lot, just as much as I may need, because I don't really have a lot of garden space, or at least to me, it is not a lot. Let's see. And White says, yes, me too. I can't wait to sow more seeds. Yes, I guess us gardeners, we are just itching to go. Some people are still harvesting at this time of year. Can you imagine that? From outdoors. Man, I would love that. But yes, like you said, I really can't wait to start growing. Sweet green peppers. Okay, okay. Let's see. West London says, I overwinter my chili plant and looking forward to seeing it work, if it worked. Okay, yeah. I've never really had peppers to overwinter, so I don't know. And White says, I don't like flowers. How can you not like flowers? They're so pretty. I like flowers, but I don't like artificial flowers. And I rather see the flowers out in the garden than seeing it cut and on my table. I like to see it on the table, but I mean, in the garden, I love to see it more. So what about tomatoes? Do you have to start your tomatoes early, or do you have a long enough growing season that you can actually go without starting your tomatoes indoors? Surprisingly, although my growing season is short, I can actually start tomatoes outdoors and be able to harvest. Not the same with the pepper, but I can actually sow my seeds, direct sow my tomato seeds outdoors and still harvest. But you're actually taking a gamble if you do that because really sometimes the first frost occurs a whole lot sooner than it should. Like last year, for example, we had our first frost within the second week of August, and that is just not right. Not right because previous years I was able to have things outside growing September. Occasionally, you might have some cooler weather crops outside in the early part of October. But we had we had frost the second week in August, and it decimated most of my garden at that point in time. And the funny thing about it is, I knew that we were going to have frost, but that day I wasn't feeling well, so I wasn't able to go outside to cover the plants. But some people went out and they covered their plants, and the plants still did not survive. So I guess I shouldn't feel too bad. But like my brassica plants, like my kales and stuff like that, they survived. So I didn't really lose everything. So I was pretty happy. But I was disappointed because for the first time in 3 years that I've been trying to grow melon, I actually had quite a few melons growing, the fruit growing, and the frost just destroyed all of that. So I'm gonna start. They don't recommend starting melon indoors, but I'm going to be starting my melons indoors because I want to ensure that I have enough growing time. But when I start it indoors, I'm going to be starting it in a larger container rather than those little tiny ones. Let's see. Russell says, if I don't start indoors, I must buy. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Same here. Most of the things, if I don't start them indoors, I have to buy them. But if I start like pretty early with the tomatoes outdoors, sometimes I can get them. If I sow the seeds, like usually when they said, okay, March 24 is the last frost, you can be sure that on the 25th of March, sorry, not March, May, that is when we have our last frost. On the 25th, I'm out there sowing. So I don't wait a day after. The moment they say, okay, the last frost is today, you know, tomorrow I'm out there sowing seeds. So that way I can maximize my harvest. Yeah, let's see. And Mike says, I sowed tomatoes indoors last year and they didn't do that well. So I re-sowed. Oh, okay. I'm still harvesting tomato, but I had to put them in a greenhouse. Okay. Nice. Nice. Must be pretty warm, fairly warm where you are that you can be harvesting still. I had a hard time with melons too. Yeah. Yeah. So as I was saying, melons don't really like to be transplanted. So for that reason, I'm going to be starting it in a large container, and I'm going to use a container that is biodegradable, so that I don't really have to damage or affect the root of the melons in any way. So I think it doesn't really matter much, maybe 3 weeks before the growing season starts, just to give it a head start. Yeah, and when I have plants that don't like to be transplanted, I tend to use a lot of plant them in seed block. So I make my own seed block and plant them in there. And sometimes I make the seed block small, depending on what type of plant it is. If it is a plant that is going to grow fast, then I make the block big so that I can plant in it, and then I don't have to disturb the plant root. I just simply transfer it to the soil. Yeah, I don't know. But the first time I tried to grow melon, I didn't really realize that it needed a lot of sunlight. And I kind of have it where it was getting sunlight, but it wasn't getting a lot because it was under my Dutch elm tree. So now I'm going to be planting it and trellising it on my fence or on one of my trellises that I've made. So we'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to seeing what happened with those melons, although I don't really like melons. I like them, but I can't eat them. Hi, rural life. First time on your live stream. Oh, welcome, my dear. Welcome. It's nice that you were able to join us. Yeah, so we're here. First, we were discussing. See, my brain is old. And even though I'm laughing, I still don't remember what we were discussing. I know we were discussing how you can identify your type of soil and oh, yes, garden design, how to design your garden. We were discussing that as well. And we covered quite a few points. So if these topics interest you, then you can just go back and watch the replay to get the information because I have some pretty practical information there. Let's see. Russell says, I wait until the first week of June to start planting the raised beds. Oh, okay. So like when does your growing season or when is your last frost, Russell? Okay, and White says soil and design. Okay, thank you for the reminder. Yes. Yeah, I don't know. So have you guys gathered all the seeds that you need to grow yet? Oh my goodness, my kids are tearing down the house. I can hear them running from one point to the other and things falling. I don't know what they're doing out there, but there's nothing in the way that can harm them. So I just let them run and enjoy themselves. Okay, you haven't gathered all your seeds yet. Yeah, I still have a few more. Some, I think two of the seeds that I want, I have to wait until the garden center opens to get them. What zone am I in? I am in zone 3B in Saskatchewan. I sound like a Canadian. I say Saskatchewan. Hmm. I usually say Saskatchewan, but Canadians say Saskatchewan. Yes, I'm in zone 3B. So my growing season is very short, like 3 months. Occasionally it might be 4 months. Yeah, which is such a pity because I can't do succession planting and I would love to do that. And there are other things that I would like to grow, but it just doesn't make sense here. Yes, in Canada. What about you? What zone are you in? I think the last frost is the first or second week of May. I have learned to wait. And it is actually beneficial to wait for more than one reason because even though they said last frost, it doesn't mean that you won't have any more frost. It is just the average last frost date. So waiting is a good idea unless, of course, your plants, the seeds that you sow, take long to germinate, or you have a means of covering up your crop when it germinates so that it won't be affected by frost. But another benefit to waiting for a little while after the growing season start before you start transplanting your stuff outside or starting your seeds outside is that all of those insects or pests that are there dormant lying down in your soil, as soon as it warms up, they get hungry, they wake up hungry, and you put your crop in and they just go in and decimate it, and then you have to start all over again. And that is why it is a good idea if you're going to be planting as soon as the growing season starts, then it is a good idea if you start seedlings indoors to make sure that you plant more than you know you're going to need. Because when these pests decide to wake up and decimate your crop, you don't want to have to start over from scratch. So if you know that you want 10 plants of tomato, then you try plant 20 and you keep the other 10 just in case something goes wrong, then you can transplant it. If you find that you have too much and the first set of plants are doing well, then you can always sell the remaining or give it away. Yeah. But like you said, Russell, waiting is a good idea. Okay, so Rural Life says she's in zone 6B to 7A in the northeast. Okay. Now, as a Jamaican, we don't talk north, south, east, and west. So now I'm kind of learning to talk north, south, east, and west. In Jamaica, you say, okay, go down the road. Here, you take the first right. Yes. But so now I'm start trying to learn when you say northeast, if you're talking about Canada, where it is, if you're talking about on the world scene, what part of the world is considered northeast. Those things, it's never something I've been interested in, so I don't really know. Yeah, shame on me, I know, but it's fine. Anything I'm not interested in, I don't bother to spend the time to learn about unless it is important for me to learn it. Then I have so much to do sometimes that I don't want to spend time doing something that I don't have to. I'm in the US, in Maryland. Okay. Who else do I know that follows my show that is in Maryland? I know someone else, but I'm not sure who. I am in New York. Okay. And we consider that Northeast. Okay, thank you for that information, Tina. So that is Northeast. What is the scene like over there, Tina, with the COVID in your region? Is it really bad or is it somewhat under control? I know that people don't really like to talk about COVID. In my regions, in Saskatchewan, we're having our first wave of the virus. And surprisingly, we are having the highest rate per capita in the country. So I don't know. Oh, you're not that far from me. Pit stop says rural life. Okay. No, I am in. No, I am from New York. I am in Vegas now. That is Southwest. Okay. Okay. Just a minute. I think I hear my son crying. Anthony, what happened? Please. Yeah, sorry about that. They were playing a bit rough. He got he got hurt. He's not happy about it. But they're always rough. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Pit stop says my husband is from MD Rural Life. What is MD? Okay. Let's see what I'm missing. into your story a little later, okay? Yeah.
What did I response? I was trying to see his name.
Okay. Okay, so MD is short for Maryland. Okay. That's good to know. The weather is so different. Yeah. I won't even talk about weather. Oh my goodness. I'm already feeling cold as I mentioned weather. Temperatures went down yesterday to the minus 30. Minus 30. Today it is minus 35 and it feels like minus 45. Yeah, it's that time of year again. So until about the second week in February, we're gonna be having weathers in the minus 30s and below. So I'm not looking forward to the next couple of weeks. I had to go outside and look after my worms today, and my goodness, uh, I just walked. Let's see, maybe about 12 feet. No, maybe about 16 feet to my garage from the house, and I was wearing three pair of gloves, and few layers of clothes plus my thickest winter jacket, two layers of pants. And when I went outside, I had a toque on, and just here was not covered. Oh my goodness, my face, my skin was burning like crazy. Yeah, so weather. I don't want to hear anything about weather. It's not nice. It snowed yesterday. Okay, yes, I remember you telling me that you showed me a video of it snowing. Yeah. But then it melted pretty quickly. Mom says I've learned a lot, especially when you explain about the different type of soil. Thanks for sharing. Good evening. Okay, bye mom. Wow, you are at the opposite extreme as me. Yes, it is pretty extreme here. I don't know what I'm doing here. I think maybe I'm crazy because that's the only reason why I would stay. But I guess the first chance I get, I'm out of here if possible. I said, Russell says, yesterday was the second time I have used the snowblower this winter. Can't complain. That's nice. That's pretty nice. I still have snow outside that I need to shovel because it snowed day before yesterday, and it is so cold outside. You can't pay me to go out there and shovel it. No way. I'm not going out there. Ain't no way I'm going out there to shovel it. I'd rather see it get compressed and become ice as long as nobody fall on it. Then I can chip the ice away when it is warmer. Let's see, I feel so bad for you. Thank you, my dear. I feel bad for myself too. I feel bad for myself too. Okay, Russell, have a good night. Yes, I think it's about time. I think the kids might need some of my attention at the moment. So if if there are no question or anything like that, then I'm going to be shutting it down and go spend some time with them. It was nice having you guys on the live. I really enjoyed the discussion with you. And for those of you who are new on the show, thank you. Thank you. And it was nice getting to know you. Great live. Good night. Okay, Tina, thank you and have a good night. All right, so that's it. Good night, Han White. Good night, everyone. I'm going to be signing out now.
Night, night.